نحمده ونصلي على الكريم أما بعد. Now, before the break, we looked at marriage with fornicators. Now, inshallah, we're going to make a start on the next topic, which the main title is marriage with non-Muslims. And under this particular topic, we'll be looking at whether it is permissible to marry Christians or Jews, and whether it is permissible to marry Hindus and Sikhs. Now, I've given handouts with regards to this particular issue, but it's also mentioned in the slide in front of us, that intermarriage between Muslims and non-Muslims is something that has been clearly prohibited in the Quran and the Sunnah. That to marry any non-Muslims, whether they are Sikhs, whether they are Hindus, whether they, just generally speaking, a Muslim woman marrying a Christian man, or a Muslim woman to marry a Jewish girl, or to marry atheists, anyone who's not a Muslim, then that is something which is considered prohibited and unlawful in Islam. However, there is an exception, and the exception is that Muslim men can marry Jewish girls and they can marry Christian girls. Okay, that is the exception. Obviously, we're going to come back to that later. But just generally speaking, intermarriage between Muslims and non-Muslims is unlawful, haram. However, it is permissible for Muslim men to marry Jewish women and for Muslim men to marry Christian girls. Now, keeping that particular principle in mind, let's have a look at the verse which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تُنْكِهُ الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنْ, that do not marry disbelieving women until they believe. That do not marry disbelievers, do not marry disbelieving women until they believe. Hatta yu'min. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, وَلَا أَمَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكَةٍ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ, that a female slave is more better than a disbelieving woman, even though if she attracts you. Even though that disbelieving woman may be more prettier, more beautiful than the slave girl, but because that slave girl is a believer, is a mu'minah, so therefore marrying her is much more better than marrying a disbelieving woman and marrying a kafir woman. And in the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that similarly, وَلَا تُنْكِهُ الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنُوا, that do not marry your girls or your daughters to disbelievers until they believe. That you have daughters, then do not marry or do not get your daughters married off to disbelieving women. And وَلَعَبْدٌ مُؤْمِنٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكٍ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكُمْ, and a man-slave who believes is better than a disbeliever, even though if he attracts you. So getting your daughters married off to a slave man, a gulam, it is more better than marrying your daughters to someone who's a disbeliever and who's a kafir. So keeping this particular Quranic verse in mind and what I mentioned above, we can quite categorically say that for a Muslim man to marry a Hindu girl, or a Muslim man to marry a Sikh girl, or a Muslim woman to marry a Hindu or a Sikh or any other religion like atheist or any Buddhist or whatever, then that is something which is impermissible and unlawful and haram in Islam. However, if that Hindu girl or if that Sikh girl converts towards Islam, then you can marry her, because obviously she's become a Muslim now, so therefore you can marry her. But whilst she's still a Hindu, whilst she's still a Sikh, then it is considered haram and unlawful for a Muslim to marry them. Now, as I mentioned before, there is an exception to this rule, and the exception is with regards to the people of the book, i.e. Jews and Christians. That in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ, meaning that lawful are those chaste women among the people of the book, meaning the Jews and Christians who have received divine scriptures and a divine book from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then to marry their women, to marry a Christian woman, to marry a Jewish woman, then that is something which is permissible and something which is lawful in Islam. So the conclusion, or we can understand with intermarriage, is that to marry Hindus, Sikhs or anything like that is haram, whether it's for a Muslim man or a Muslim woman. However, a Muslim man can marry a Jewish woman a Muslim man can marry a Christian woman. However, vice versa, i.e. a Muslim woman cannot marry a Jewish man, a Muslim woman cannot marry a Christian man. And the reason why is mentioned in the next slide is that people may say that, okay, if the permissibility is there for Muslim men, that Muslim men can marry Jewish women, Muslim men can marry Christian women, so therefore that flexibility and that permissibility should also be allowed for Muslim women. So the reason why that Muslim women are not allowed to marry Christian men or Jewish men is because of their nature. That a woman, one good quality of a woman is that she likes to impress her husband. That she will do things, she's very obedient, she will like to do things which will impress her husband. Now just say for example, you have a Muslim woman, she's married a Christian man. Now that Christian man is being kind to her, his conduct is good. Then through those little things, that Muslim woman will be impressed by this. That she will say, oh, my husband is so good, like he's so kind to me, he gives me presents and so on. And then what would happen is that because he's a Christian man, then that will have an effect on her iman and on her faith. So therefore, and because like women, they are emotionally weak and so on, so therefore Islam has prohibited women from marrying Christian men and from marrying Jewish men. Okay, the permissibility is only for the men, i.e. a Muslim man can marry a Jewish woman, or a Muslim man can marry a Christian woman. Okay. Now the next slide looks at the issue of marriage with Christians and Jews in more detail. Now as I mentioned that, generally speaking, intermarriage with non-Muslim is unlawful. However, there is an exception, and the exception is that Muslim men can marry Christian women, Muslim men can marry Jewish women. However, the scholars and the ulamas have said that even though the nikah is permissible, meaning the nikah is valid, however, a couple of points should be worth consideration. Now, what are the couple of points? What is the first point? The first point is that women who are Christians and Jews merely by name and do not really believe in any religion, like a large number of people in the West, cannot be termed as people of the book, i.e. Ahl Kitab. Now, there are many, like for example, in England or in America, just because they're white or just because it's like a Christian country, we assume them to be Christians. And we just marry a white girl or a Western girl, and if anybody asks, oh, how come you married a white girl? So you just say, oh, she's a Christian or she's a Jew, that's why I married her. But it should be worth noting, and that is that there are many women in England, there are many women in Canada, in America, in Western countries, who are just Christians by name. They are not really Christian. Many of them, if you ask them regarding religion, they will say that, oh, we don't believe in God. It's just like we just have Christmas and we just give some presents here and there and we go for a feast and so on. But besides that, when you talk to them about religion, many of them don't believe in God. They don't believe in a creator. They don't believe in someone exists and so on. So therefore, those kind of women, they are termed as atheists. And as I mentioned before, to marry atheists is haram, is unlawful in Islam. So therefore, it is very important that if we are thinking of marrying a Christian woman or a Jewish woman, that we need to first determine that whether they are really Christian or whether they are really Jews or not. Okay, if they are just Jews and Christians just by name, just because they're white we think, or they're Christians, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are Christians in their heart. That there are many who don't believe in God, they don't believe in Jesus, they don't believe in the Bible. So obviously those kind of women, you can term them as atheists, and as I mentioned before, that you are not allowed, or it's not permissible for Muslim men to marry them. And the second point which I've written there is that the masla, or this kind of flexibility or this permissibility of marrying Christian women or Jewish women is with regards to permissibility, meaning that it is permissible and lawful for you to marry Christian women and Jewish women, And if the contract, i.e. if the marriage was performed with them, then the marriage will be valid, meaning that the nikah will be done. And any children who are born will be considered legitimate, meaning that if any, just for example, you married a white girl, and then later on you find out that she's not a true Christian and so on, then obviously the marriage with her will be done, will be considered, will be performed, and the children who will be born will be considered legitimate. Okay. However, if we look at the next slide, there are various narrations that establish its undesirability. Now, even though there is this permissibility from Islam to marry a Jewish woman, to marry a Christian woman, however, there are many narrations, there are many ahadith which indicate towards its undesirability, indicate towards its karahiyat and towards its detestability. And in particular, I haven't mentioned there, but I'll just mention an incident which happened between Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu and a companion called Huzaifa bin Yaman radhiyallahu anhu. Now, after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's death, Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, he, obviously after Hazrat Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu's death as well, Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu became the second Khalifa of Islam. So, whilst he was the Khalifa, he made Hazrat Huzaifa bin Yaman radhiyallahu anhu, a companion, a Sahabi, he made him the leader of Madain. Madain is the name of a city. So what happened was that Huzaifa bin Yaman radhiyallahu anhu in Madain, he got married to a Jewish girl. He got married to a Jewish woman. So Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu found out about this, and he wrote a letter to Hazrat Huzaifa bin Yaman radhiyallahu anhu and ordering him, instructing him to divorce this Jewish girl. So Hazrat Huzaifa bin Yaman radhiyallahu anhu wrote back to Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu asking him that is it impermissible or is it unlawful for me to marry Jewish girls? So Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu replied by saying that it is not impermissible, it is not unlawful for you to marry them. However, women from those societies or from those tribes or those nations, they are immoral. This is the word of Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, that those kind of women, i.e. Jewish women and Christian women, they are immoral. And I fear, this is Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu saying, that I fear that immorality and immodesty will enter your house through this channel and through this way. That meaning that if you were to get married to this Jewish girl or this Christian women, because they tend to be immodest, immoral, then immorality will enter in your house, i.e. any offspring you have, any children you have, they will be immoral, they will be immodest. So therefore Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu prohibited Hazrat Huzaifa bin Yaman radhiyallahu anhu to get married. So the conclusion, what we can understand is that it is permissible in principle to marry a Jewish woman or a Christian woman. However, it is considered, severely disliked, makruh tahlimi, to marry such women. Okay? And with regards to Hindus and Sikhs and atheists and Buddhists, as I mentioned before, then because they don't believe in a God, they don't believe in the divine scriptures, so therefore to marry them, straight away, then technically that is not allowed and that is not permissible in Islam. Now the next topic which we are going to look at is with regards to marrying Shias. That whether it is permissible to marry Shias or not. Now the Shia sect began after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, the Shias believe that the same way a prophet is chosen by Allah, is chosen by God, similarly a Khalifa or a leader is also chosen by God and is also chosen by Allah. And they say that there are many traditions, or this is what they say, that there are many traditions which say or which indicated that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose Hazrat Ali radhiyallahu anhu to be the first Khalifa, to be the first leader. However, as you know, the Sunnis, we believe, the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah believe that no, that is wrong, and that Hazrat Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu is the rightful first Khalifa. So from there, that's where this sect and this group began. Now there are 12 groups of Shia, and obviously we need to, and if for example, if you are involved in such a situation or you know someone who may be getting married to a Shia or is thinking of getting married to a Shia, then you need to analyze each sect. And depending on their belief, then you can determine whether it is permissible for you to marry that particular woman or that particular girl. But there are 12 groups, and many of their beliefs are mentioned or is mentioned in the slide in front of you. That there will be two types of Shias. Firstly, the first type of Shias are those who believe that the Quran has been altered. That there are some Shias who believe that there are 40 paras in the Holy Quran. Not 30, but there are 40. And they say that 10 paras are goat actually on the way or something like that. So those kind of Shias, because they don't believe in the Holy Quran, because they say that it's 40 paras, whereas everybody knows it's like 30 paras of the Holy Quran. So when they are saying that there are extra parts of the Holy Quran, they are in fact not believing in the Holy Quran which is in front of us. So those who don't believe in the Holy Quran, then very simply they are kafir, they are disbelievers. There are some Shias who say that Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu is a god. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu is a god himself. And there are some Shias who accuse Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha of committing adultery. Now, what do you mean by committing adultery? This is a story which can be found in Surah An-Nur, and the story is called Waqiyatul Ifk, where in 6th Hijri, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Muslim army, they were returning back from the Battle of Banu Mustalaq, which happened in 6th Hijri. And in this particular battle, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam beloved wife, Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, was or accompanied Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this particular battle. So what happened was that the caravan, the camp or the group, they stopped over at a particular place and for the night. And then after that, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made an announcement that the caravan is going to proceed or is going to go ahead and go to Medina Munawwara. Now Hazrat Aisha anha was in a tent, which in Arabic is called Hawdaj. She left the tent and she went to the toilet, she released herself. Then when she was coming back, the necklace she was wearing, that broke. So the marbles or the pebbles from the necklace fell on the ground. So it took Hazrat Aisha anha some time to relocate all the pebbles and all the necklaces. And after she relocated all of them, she goes back to the camp and she sees that the camp have left her. So Hazrat Aisha anha decided that what I'll do is I'll just stay here, and then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will realize that I'm not in my tent, and then he will come and collect me. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sunnah and practice was that whenever a large group traveled, he would always designate or assign a sahabi or a companion to be at the back of the caravan. And this sahabi or this companion, if anybody has left something or if anyone has been left behind, this sahabi would collect those items, collect that person, and will direct him to Medina or direct that person to Medina Munawwara. So in that particular journey, Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal radiallahu anhu was assigned that particular duty. So Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal radiallahu anhu is traveling behind the caravan, and he reaches that point and he sees Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. And what happens, a long story, but he ushers Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha on his camel, on his mount, and he directs Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha on the camel towards Medina Munawwara. Now whilst they were going, and when they reached Medina Munawwara, some hypocrites saw this, and they made this false claim that Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, na'uzubillah, was unfaithful to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she committed adultery with Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal radiallahu anhu. And even some Muslims also fell into this trap, and they also spread this rumor. And it's mentioned in the Holy Quran that those who spread the rumor, because they made a false accusation of adultery, they were whipped 80 times. And 2 rukus in the Holy Quran was revealed, and I was telling all the Muslims that Hazrat Aisha anha didn't commit such an act, and Hazrat Aisha anha is chaste, and she can't commit such an act. But even then, some Shia still believe that Hazrat Aisha anha did zina and committed adultery with Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal radiallahu anhu. So for them to still believe in that, it's as though they are rejecting 2 rukus of the Holy Quran. So those who reject any portion of the Holy Quran, they are disbelievers and they are kafir. Now from the first group of people, those who believe that the Quran has been altered, or those Shias who believe that Sayyidina Ali anhu is God, they believe, na'uzubillah, that Hazrat Aisha anha committed adultery, then very simply they are kafir, they are disbelievers. And the same way to marry a disbeliever, an atheist, a Sikh or a Hindu is haram, so therefore to marry such Shias will also be haram and unlawful as well. Now the second category of Shia are those who do not believe in such beliefs. They don't have such beliefs, okay? Like there's some Shias who just say that, or Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu should have been the first Khalifa and so on, and that's it. They don't believe in the Holy Quran being altered. They don't say Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu to be like God. They don't, have these kind of beliefs with regards to Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. So those Shias who don't have such a belief, then marriage with this category of Shia should not be considered. However, if it is done, it will be valid. Because obviously, why shouldn't it be considered? Meaning, because obviously, it's a unanimous view of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is the first Khalifa of Islam. And if a Shia believes Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu to be the first Khalifa of Islam, so we won't call him a kafir, we won't call him a disbeliever, but we will call him fasik, we will call him a transgressor, we will call him seriously deviated from the straight path. So therefore, you shouldn't marry those kind of Shias. However, if you do, then the nikah and the marriage will be valid. The contract of marriage will be correct. With regards to the first category of Shia, because they're like, very simply, they're kafir and disbelievers, so marriage with them would not be allowed or would not be permissible at all. Okay. Now, if you have a look at I haven't actually written a slide on this, but if you have a look at the notes which I've given in front of you, you will find a paragraph where I have said that if he repents and changes his beliefs, then it will be permissible to marry. Now, this is like a question we always get at Darul Iftar, and that is that there is like a girl, the scenario of that particular case was that a girl, she wanted to get married to a Shia. Now the Shia said to this girl that, okay, I've repented now, I'm not Shia anymore, I've become a Sunni. So now the girl is asking that whether I would still be allowed to marry that particular Shia man. So I've written there that even though if he has sincerely repented from his belief, that he doesn't hold those kind of beliefs and he's really become a Sunni, then it will be permissible for you to marry without any detestability. However, I've written there that you need to deduce or determine whether he is genuine or not. Okay? The reason why is that because Shias, they do something called taqiyya. Okay? Now what is taqiyya? Now there's two things. One is tawriyya and one is taqiyya. Tawriyya in the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we say that is allowed where there is necessity. And taqiyya, that is not allowed. And what is tawriyya? Tawriyya is that you say something where you've taken one meaning or one interpretation and the listener has taken another interpretation. So just say, for example, like somebody said, like I say that, okay, I'm going to go home tomorrow. So I'm going to go home. So you just say I'm going to go home. So the listener in front of me took the meaning that I'm going to go home now. Whereas I took the meaning that I'm going to go home tomorrow. I'm going to go home 2 weeks later, something like that. So that is called tawriyya. And wherever there is a need, necessity, durura, then it becomes permissible. But taqiyya is an outward lie. Meaning that taqiyya, which Shias do, is basically they lie and they act upon that lie. Okay? Like the Shias will say that, okay, I've become a Sunni, and they will pretend to act like a Sunni, whereas in their heart they will have beliefs which constitutes kufr. So therefore it's quite important that you determine whether he's really telling the truth or not. Okay? Some Shias will say, just to get married to a Sunni girl, they will say, yeah, I've become a Sunni. Or a Shia girl, just to get married to a Sunni guy, will say that, yeah, I've become a Sunni. They will act like a Sunni. They will like go to the mosque, they will come to a Sunni mosque, they will do everything like a Sunni, but in their heart, they will have the Shia beliefs. They will have the beliefs which constitutes kufr. So therefore, it is very important that we determine whether they are Shias or not. And as I said, the best thing is just to like find another girl and obviously refrain from marrying a Shia girl. Okay, before we look at the next section, engagements, if you have a look at the handouts which I have given in front of you after marriage with Shias, there's a couple of rulings which just came into my mind after I did the course book. And that is with regards to Nikaya Muta and Nikaya Misir. Because we're looking at, those kind of women whom you're not allowed to marry and so on and so forth, advisable, and plus we just talked about Shias as well. I'll take the opportunity to talk about Nikaya Muta. Now, what is Nikaya Muta? Now, Nikaya Muta is a temporary marriage. And this is something which is practiced by Shia. And Nikaya Muta, very simply, is a form of prostitution. Okay? It is a marriage based on a fixed period of time. Okay? It's not like a proper official marriage ceremony where you will have witnesses and so on. It's basically a marriage for a day, for a couple of days, for 3 days and so on. So just for example, a boy, he will meet a girl and he will say to the girl that, can I get married to you for 1 day? And I will pay you £10 or £100 and so on. And the girl will accept. That's it. There will be no witnesses or anything like that. And during that night or during that day, the man will fulfill his desires. And then as soon as the 24-hour period or the 2-day period finishes, then they will separate straight away without divorce, without the need of giving talaq or without the need of giving divorce. So that is the definition of muta. Now, if you have a look at the hadith which I mentioned with regards to muta, there is a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari narrated by Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib anhu, that on the day of Khaybar is the battle of Khaybar, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade the muta, i.e. the temporary marriage and the eating of donkey meat. That before Khaybar, or before the battle of Khaybar, this kind of temporary marriage was allowed. Because the Sahabas, the companions, they would go for battles, they would go for many expeditions, they would be away from home. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam permitted them to do nikah muta, to have a kind of temporary marriage with a girl. But after the battle of Khaybar, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade and prohibited nikah muta, and he also prohibited the eating of donkey meat. And the similar hadith of Sayyid Bukhari narrated by Hazrat Ali anhu, that said to Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas anhu, that during the battle of Khaybar, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade nikah muta and the eating of donkey meat. Okay? And there's other hadiths as well. So the conclusion is that nikah muta, which is practiced by Shia, is something which is haram and something which is unlawful in Islam. Okay? It's not allowed at all. Okay? Which takes me on to the next type of nikah, which is called nikah misir. Now some cynics may say that nikah misir is a Sunni version of nikah muta. It's like a Sunni way of having a temporary marriage. But when we look at the definition of nikah misir, we can deduce quite clearly that there is a big difference between nikah muta, a temporary marriage, and this nikah misir. Okay, there is a big difference, and because of that reason, so therefore nikah misir is something which is lawful and halal in Islam. Now obviously, if you just have a look at the notes in front of you, the handouts in front of you, obviously you could read the whole paragraph in your own time. But just very briefly, the gist or the crux of the paragraph is that nikah misir is like an official marriage. What do you mean by that? It's like, for example, it is done in front of witnesses. That it's not like a quiet hush-hush type of marriage like nikah muta is. That it's like a ceremony, it's like a proper marriage, it's done in front of witnesses, there will be people there. Okay? Where the husband will say, offer, and the girl will accept, or the girl will offer and the husband or the groom will accept. But what happens in nikah misir, what is different from nikah misir and the traditional nikah and the traditional marriage is that in nikah misir, the girl, she will give up some of her rights. Okay, now what are the rights? Now obviously this is something which we're going to look at actually next week in the rights of husband and wife, is that there are 3 rights which a wife has or a girl has when she gets married. That is that the husband has to provide her food, like you could say nafaqah, maintenance, has to financially maintain her, which includes food and so on. Number 2, the husband has to give her an apartment to live in, has to give her a house to live in or some kind of living quarter or living apartment. And number 3 is kiswa, meaning that the husband has to clothe her wife and so on. So these are the 3 rights which the husband has to give. But in nikah misir, what happens is that the girl, she gets married, but she intentionally or she willingly, she gives up all her rights. She says that, no, I don't want to, have any rights or anything like that. You don't even have to financially maintain me. You don't have to give me a house to live in. I will live with my parents. My parents will look after me. You don't have to give me any clothes. But what happens is, the bottom line is that here and there, the man will meet up with his wife and he will fulfill his desire. Okay? And this nikah misir happens a lot in, kind of happens a lot in Arab countries, where these like rich Arab businessmen, when they travel to a lot of like all these countries like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and so on, so what happens is that they will go to these places, and because they are there for business for 2-3 months or even a month or so, and they're away from their wives, what will happen is that they will contract this nikah misir, where the girl will live with her parents. Okay, they will give her a lot of dowry, because obviously it's not a proper marriage. They will give her a lot of dowry, and whenever they in Dubai or whenever they are in Abu Dhabi and so on, they will go and stay with her, they will fulfill her desires and so on, and then as soon as that finishes, they will leave. Okay? So that is nikah misir. Now, what is the difference between nikah mutta and nikah misir? And it's quite clear. The difference is that in nikah mutta, is a temporary marriage where there was a fixed period. In nikah misir, there isn't a fixed period. What's happening is that the girl, she is willingly giving up some of her rights. Okay? But there is no fixed period where after the trip finishes, that's it, the nikah is broken. No. Even after the trip finishes, let's say the husband's been there for just like 4 weeks on a business trip. So after the 4 weeks finishes, he's gone back to his country, but the girl's nikah or the marriage is still intact with this guy. The only thing is that the husband is not living with the girl. Okay? But the marriage is still intact. The marriage isn't broken. Okay? Whereas in nikah mutta, after the expiry of the date, like 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever, the nikah breaks straight away. Okay? But in nikah misir, the nikah doesn't break. The nikah is still there. But the difference is that the husband is not living with his wife, or the husband is, away from his wife and is not financially supporting his wife. That is different. But the actual marriage and the actual nikah is done. Like some people, they do it like nowadays as well, that they will go Bangladesh and they've been there for like 6 months and so on. So they get bored, they're away from their wife. So what they do is they just like do this kind of nikah, a second marriage. They will just leave the girl there, and then they will come back to England, stay there for a year, 2 years, and then when 2 years later they will go back to Bangladesh. They will see this wife of theirs, and they will like fulfill her desires and so on. That's what they do. So there is a difference between nikah mutta and nikah misir, and the scholars have said that the marriage is considered valid as long as there's been offer and acceptance from the groom and from the bride, and it has been done in the presence of 2 witnesses. So the marriage is correct, the nikah is correct. However, such marriages are inappropriate. In terms of its validity, the nikah is done. However, such marriages are inappropriate. And why is it inappropriate? I mentioned last week, the marriage is a everlasting thing. Marriage, the reason why we get married is for that peace, for that tranquility. And obviously, such marriages, you're not going to get any peace or tranquility. Okay, obviously, you could say the lust or the desire is being fulfilled, but there's no peace and tranquility. Imagine the girl being away from her husband, or the husband not seeing her for months and months and even years. So you could imagine like how she's going to feel. So that is not the whole purpose of marriage. So therefore, the nikah, the validity of the nikah, no doubt about that, that is done. However, because the purpose of marriage is not fulfilled, so therefore such marriages and such nikah will be considered unlawful and haram. Okay, if you have a look at the next section, before we start looking at the contract of marriage, is with regards to engagement. Now there are 2 angles to look at this particular subject with regards to engagement. The first angle is that what does Islam say with regards to engagement? That what is engagement? What is the value of engagement in Islam? And the second way to look at this topic is with regards to having an engagement party. That whether engagement party or an engagement get-together is something which is lawful or permissible in Islam. Now firstly, what does Islam say with regards to engagement? Engagements are considered as a promise. Okay? When the boy's family, or when the boy has said to the girl that I want to get married to you, and the girl kind of agrees, then that is considered as a promise. So engagement is considered as a promise, that the girl's family is willing to give their daughter to this particular boy. So engagement is a promise. Okay? And if, for example, something happens and after the engagement the couples break up, then obviously, the person, if it's done for some reason, like if it's done because of some Islamic reason, like something you found something about the girl which was not right, then obviously there will be no sin for you. However, if you just break it just for the sake of it, then you will get the sin of breaking a promise. And the hadith mentioned in Sahih Bukhari that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that person who breaks a promise, then it is a sign of a munafiq. Ayatul munafiq is salat. That it is a sign of a munafiq. So a person who breaks a promise or an engagement, then he will get the sin of breaking a promise. Okay. Now another issue with regards to engagements here is that when the boy and the girl are engaged, they are not considered as a husband and wife. They're not considered as they have got married. That is like another kind of problem within our society, and that is that whenever engagement has happened between a boy and girl, many parents think that, they've done the marriage, they've done the nikah. And what would happen is that there will be many parents who will allow their daughters to go out with their future in-laws. That they will say to daughters, okay, go out with him, go to a restaurant, go for a meal and so on, go to the pictures, go to the cinemas and so on. They will do that. Whereas the masla of the ruling is that when an engagement happens, you're not married. Technically, you're not married. You're still considered as a ghair mahram. That woman is still considered as a strange woman to you. So the same way like a strange woman, you're not allowed to take her to the pictures, you're not allowed to take her to the restaurant. Similarly, your fiance, you're not allowed to take her to the pictures or to the cinemas. Okay, so that is one thing which needs to be clarified. Now the second issue which is on the slide, and also I've written in the handouts as well, and that is whether it's permissible to have an engagement party. Now, so I'm not going to go over everything which is mentioned here, but just very briefly, engagement parties are something which is allowed in Islam. Some people may say that this is a bid'ah, but the matter of fact is that they haven't understood the definition of bid'ah. And I'm not going to take this opportunity to go over the definition of bid'ah. It's a very long definition. But just very briefly, that it is permissible to have an engagement party. And I've probably written on the second slide as well, in the conclusion, that there are two conditions for the permissibility of holding engagement ceremonies or functions. And the two conditions are that they should not be regarded as sunnah or part of religion. That if you consider engagement to be part of sunnah, that this is something which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, then that becomes a bid'ah, because it's not something which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. So as long as you don't consider it to be part of deen or part of the religion. And number two, which is the most important part, that is that various evils and unlawful practices are avoided. Like many engagement parties you may have been invited to, where there is intermingling between men and women, where there is music, where there is music, where there is unlawful unlawful things or acts are happening there, where a lot of like customs and a lot of kind of things which are not associated with Islam is happening and is occurring. So if these things are happening, then obviously it will be impermissible. However, if various evil and unlawful practices are avoided, and a person does not consider it to be part of Islam or Deen, then it will be permissible to have an engagement party. Okay, now very briefly, I'm just going to make a start, just make a start in the next section, and inshallah we'll finish for this particular week. Now, the first, obviously we'll just have a look at the course book. The section which we're going to look at is with regards to the validity of nikah. Now, marriage is so simple in Islam. Okay, you don't need a hall or anything like that to conduct a marriage or a nikah. You don't even need an imam sahib or someone to do the nikah. If a boy in front of the girl says that I want to get married to you, or he says any words which indicates towards the offer, and the girl accepts, she says, yeah, okay, and there are two witnesses there, the nikah and the marriage is done. Okay, there's no such thing as, you need an imam there or anything like that. If the boy and the girl just do it amongst themselves and there are two witnesses there, then the nikah and the marriage will be done. So as I mentioned, that for a marriage to be valid, certain conditions must be met. And what is number one? Consent of both parties, meaning the offer and acceptance on behalf of the boy and the girl. And number two, witnesses. That there has to be witnesses. Obviously, each section will be looked at in detail. If we just make a start on the first one, the contract of marriage, as I mentioned, that a marriage can be executed by just two words. Like if a person says the following words in the presence of witnesses, that I give my daughter to you in marriage, and the person who is addressed replies, I accept her in marriage, then in doing so the marriage is valid and both of them are considered as lawful husband and wife. So just as an example, normally what happens in a gathering, that the girl's father, obviously the girl won't be there, but the girl's father, she will kind of offer her daughter. She will say that my daughter, whose name is Zainab, the daughter of Abdul Rahman, I intend to give my daughter to you, and the guy accepts. He says yes, okay. Then after that, the marriage and the nikah will be done. Okay, if these two statements are communicated and the verse and the witnesses they hear this communication of the offer and acceptance, then the nikah and the marriage will be done. And the second paragraph in the course book, it says that if the daughter is present and the father says, I give this daughter of mine in marriage to you. So if the daughter is there, not the girl's guardian or anything like that, just the daughter is there, and the daughter is present, but the girl's father says to the guy that I give this daughter of mine to you, meaning that he doesn't mention her name, he just indicates towards the girl and says that I give my daughter to you, and the guy accepts, the groom accepts, then the marriage and the nikah will be done. And the next paragraph, he just basically says that if a girl is not present, then it is necessary that you mention her name and the name of her father in such a loud tone that all the witnesses are able to hear. Okay? So if the girl is not present, then you have to mention her name. As I mentioned before, that you have to say the girl's name, that Zainab, daughter of Abdul Rahman, or daughter of Bakr, you have to mention her name. And it has to be done in such a tone that the two witnesses, or whoever the witnesses are, they can clearly hear the communication of the girl's name and the offer and the acceptance. Okay, they can hear both of the words clearly, and as is mentioned later, that if there is a strong possibility that by mentioning the girl's name, you will not know whose nikah or whose marriage is performed, then it will be necessary for you to mention the grandfather's name as well. Now, just before we finish, I'm just going to look at one quick masla, which I've given handouts for, and that is with regards to signing the marriage certificate. Now, obviously, the handouts you can read in your own time, but just very briefly, this happens sometimes, is that you've got the boy and girl in front of you. Okay, you got the boy or girl in front of you, or, for example, what generally happens is that you got the boy there, and the girl's father or the girl's guardian. Now, what happened is that the girl's father, he didn't communicate the offer. He didn't say to the groom that I give my daughter Zainab to you. What happens is that the girl's father just signs the marriage certificate. He just signs. He doesn't say anything. He just signs the marriage certificate. And the guy, the groom, he doesn't say I accept. He doesn't say that qabil tuha. He doesn't say I accept. He just basically signs the marriage certificate. Now the masla is that in that situation, the marriage would not be done. Okay? With regards to this particular masla, the offer and the acceptance, it has to be done verbally. Okay? Just merely signing the marriage certificate, that would not constitute a valid marriage or a valid nikah. Okay? You have to say those words verbally. Okay? There is a situation which I mentioned, it comes later, that if there are different parts of the country, then obviously then they can do that, which I mentioned later on in the handout. But just very briefly, if they are in front of each other, or the girl's guardian is in front of each other, or even the boy's guardian is in front of each other, then they have to mention the offer and acceptance. It has to be communicated. Just signing the marriage certificate, that would not be sufficient, that would not be enough. You have to actually you have to say the offer verbally, and you have to even say the acceptance verbally as well. And if such a nikah is carried out or is conducted, then obviously the marriage and the nikah will not be done. inshallah we'll just leave it at that particular masla. Inshallah next week we'll conclude the book, inshallah. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, before we finish, just like to give the questions sheet. Okay, just very briefly the question. Give me a few. Okay, now some of the things in the case scenario, this week's case scenario, we haven't actually looked at, so if we just leave that blank. But anyway, we've done most of them, so just have a look at the case scenario. Zayd is 25 years old, and last year he decided to marry Zainab. So Zayd, he decided to get married to Zainab. Now Zayd is from Birmingham, and Zainab is from Dubai. Zayd could not get time off work and is thinking of getting married to her over the telephone. Is that permissible? Okay, now, nikah over the telephone, we haven't looked at that, so you can just leave that blank. The second paragraph is that if Zayd can get time off work, he is planning to go to Dubai and have a quick ceremony. Just Zainab and him in front of an imam. Would this marriage be done? Does the father have to be there? Okay, Mr. HR. So again, this particular section we haven't looked at, we'll look at next week. Now the third one, which we have done, before the marriage was agreed, her mother, i.e. Zainab's mother, was in England, and she came to see him and his parents in Birmingham. While she was entering his house, she fell awkwardly. Zayd helped his future mother-in-law up, but whilst holding her hand, he had an erection. What would happen to his marriage with Zainab? So what would happen in that situation? And to make matters worse, later on, while speaking to his future mother-in-law, he realized that some of her beliefs are similar to the Shia sect. What shall he do now? Okay. Advise Zayd and questions. Name the 2 conditions for the validity of the Islamic marriage which we looked at. What are the 3 conditions to establish Hurmat Musahara? And okay, what does Islam say regarding forced marriages, which we haven't looked at yet. So inshallah we'll look at next week.